The playground was silent, a graveyard of colorful plastic and cold metal. Usually, by 4 p.m., Oakwood Elementary was a ghost town, but today a single figure remained. 6-year-old Lily sat on the bottom of the slide, her small hands gripping the edge of her seat until her knuckles turned white. When Principal Marcus Reed approached her, he expected a simple explanation, a late parent or a forgotten bus schedule. But as he knelt in the gravel, the look in Lily's eyes chilled him to the bone. It wasn't the look of a child who was lost. It was the look of a child who was terrified of being found. "Lily, sweetheart, your mom will be here soon," Marcus said softly. Lily didn't look up. She whispered words that would haunt Marcus for the rest of his life. "Please, Mr. Reed, if I go home today, I won't come back tomorrow. I'm already dead there." The air turned cold. Marcus realized this wasn't just a case of a late pickup. This was the beginning of a nightmare that would tear a family apart and reveal a secret buried beneath years of perfect smiles and white picket fences. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the empty hallway of Oakwood Elementary. Marcus Reed, a man who had spent 20 years in education, prided himself on knowing his students. He knew who was a troublemaker, who was a math whiz, and who needed an extra sandwich at lunch. But Lily Evans was a mystery he hadn't yet solved. Lily was a quiet, ethereal child with wide blue eyes and hair the color of harvested wheat. She was the kind of student teachers loved, obedient, brilliant, and invisible. Her parents, Sarah and Thomas Evans, were the pillars of the community. Thomas was a high-profile defense attorney, and Sarah was a former nurse who ran the local charity drives. They were the golden couple. Marcus sat in his office, finishing a stack of disciplinary reports, when the school janitor, old Arthur, knocked on his door. "Principal Reed, you might want to see this. There's a little one still out by the swings. I tried to talk to her, but she's like a statue." Marcus frowned, checking his watch. 4:45 p.m. The last bus had left nearly 2 hours ago. Did the after-school program miss someone? "She isn't enrolled in the program," Arthur replied, shaking his head. "She's just sitting." Marcus stood up, his joints popping. He walked through the echoing halls, the sound of his dress shoes clicking against the linoleum. When he stepped outside, the evening chill hit him. There she was, Lily. She was wearing her bright yellow backpack, the straps pulled so tight they dug into her shoulders. "Lily?" Marcus called out gently as he approached the slide. The girl flinched. It wasn't a small startle. It was a full-body jolt, as if she expected a blow to land. She didn't look at him. She stared at a small patch of dirt between her sneakers. "Lily, it's Mr. Reed. Is your mom coming to get you? Or maybe your dad?" "They're coming," she whispered. Her voice was thin, like paper. "But I'm not going." Marcus knelt, trying to catch her eye. "It's getting dark, Lily. It's not safe to stay here. Why don't we go into my office? We can call your house. Maybe there was a mistake." "No calls," Lily said, finally looking up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she wasn't crying. It was worse. She looked exhausted, a kind of weariness that no 6-year-old should possess. "If you call, they'll know I tried to stay. If they know I tried to stay, the quiet game ends, and I'm not ready for it to end." Marcus felt a knot form in his stomach. "The quiet game? Is that a game you play at home?" Lily nodded slowly. "Mommy says it's to keep the house peaceful, but the rules change. Sometimes the rule is, I don't eat. Sometimes the rule is, I don't sleep. Today the rule is that I have to go to the basement because I broke the light." "What light, Lily?" "The light in Daddy's eyes," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "She says I took the light away from him, so I have to live in the dark." Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. This was a girl describing psychological torture with the casual tone of someone describing the weather. He reached out to pat her shoulder, but she pulled away instantly. "Don't," she pleaded. "If I have your scent on me, she'll know I talked. She smells everything." Before Marcus could respond, a sleek black SUV pulled into the school's circular driveway. The engine purred like a predator. The door opened and Sarah Evans stepped out. She looked impeccable in a cream-colored trench coat, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. She wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a practiced pageant queen smile. "Lily! Oh, sweetheart, there you are," Sarah called out, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I'm so sorry, Mr. Reed. Our clocks at home must be off. I thought it was only 4 o'clock. Marcus stood up, his professional mask sliding into place, though his heart was hammering against his ribs. Mrs. Evans, we were getting a bit worried. Lily's been here quite a while. Sarah reached Lily and placed a hand on the girl's head. Lily went rigid, her gaze dropping back to the dirt. I feel terrible, Sarah said, looking at Marcus. Thomas is working a big case, and I got caught up in the garden. You know how it is. Lily, come on, honey, say goodbye to the principal. We have a very special evening planned. Lily didn't move. She looked at Marcus one last time, a silent, desperate plea for help. But without proof, without a mark on her body, what could he do? Go on, Lily, Marcus said, his voice tight. I'll see you tomorrow morning, first thing, okay? He watched as Sarah led Lily to the car. As the SUV drove away, Marcus noticed something. In the back window, Lily pressed her palm against the glass. She wasn't waving, she was leaving a print, a mark to show she had been there. Marcus stood in the dark playground for a long time. He knew he had just watched a child walk into a cage. He also knew that if he didn't find out what was happening in the Evans household, Lily might never come back to Oakwood Elementary again. Marcus couldn't sleep. The image of Lily's hand against the car window haunted his rest, a pale ghost against the tinted glass. He spent the night pacing his small apartment, the silence of his own home suddenly feeling heavy and suspicious. By 6 a.m., he was back at his desk, the glow of his computer monitor the only light in the administrative wing. He pulled up Lily's file. It was pristine. Straight A's, perfect attendance, glowing reports from her kindergarten teacher. But as he dug deeper into the family's history, the perfection started to feel manufactured. Thomas Evans was a titan in the legal world, often appearing on local news defending high-profile corporate clients. Sarah was a professional volunteer. They donated a new scoreboard to the gym last year. They were the school's biggest benefactors. Too perfect, Marcus muttered, rubbing his eyes. A soft knock at the door startled him. It was Mrs. Gable, the veteran first-grade teacher who had Lily in her class this year. She looked frazzled, clutching a stack of finger-painted canvases. "Marcus, you're in early," she said, stepping inside. "I wanted to show you something. I was going through the art portfolios last night and, well, Lily's work is changing." She laid 3 paintings on his desk. The first, from September, was a typical child's drawing of a house with a yellow sun and a smiling family. The second, from November, showed the same house, but the sun was blacked out with heavy charcoal. The third painting, finished just yesterday, was chilling. It depicted a large, beautiful woman with a face made of mirrors. In the reflection of the woman's dress, a tiny girl was curled in a ball painted in dark, muddy browns. There were no mouths on any of the figures. "The quiet game," Marcus whispered, remembering Lily's words. "She won't talk in class anymore," Mrs. Gable said, her voice trembling. "She finishes her work in record time and then just stares at the clock. And Marcus, she started wearing long sleeves, even on the days the heat is cranked up to 80. Marcus felt a cold stone settle in his gut. "Did you check for marks?" "I tried. When I asked her to wash her hands for lunch, I went to help her push up her sleeves. She screamed, not a loud scream, but a gasp, like I'd stabbed her. She pulled away and hid under the sink. I had to call the nurse just to get her out." Marcus leaned back, his mind racing. "The mother, Sarah, what's your impression?" Mrs. Gable sighed. "She's lovely, charming, always bringing cookies for the lounge. But I've noticed something, Marcus. When Sarah is in the room, Lily doesn't breathe. Not really. She takes these tiny, shallow sips of air, like she's trying not to disturb the molecules around her." Just then, the school's front bell rang, signaling the arrival of the first buses. Marcus stood up, his jaw set. "Keep a close eye on her today, Martha. If she shows up. If she doesn't, call me immediately." But Lily did show up. She arrived in the same black SUV, looking like a porcelain doll in a navy blue dress with a white lace collar. Sarah waved cheerfully to Marcus from the driver's seat, blowing a kiss to Lily as the girl stepped onto the sidewalk. Lily walked past Marcus without a glance. Her eyes were fixed on her shoes. As she passed, Marcus noticed a faint, sweet smell, cloying and thick. It wasn't the smell of a child. It was the heavy, floral scent of expensive perfume. Sarah's perfume. It was so strong it felt like a physical weight on the girl. Marcus followed her at a distance. He watched her enter the classroom, watched her sit at her desk, and watched her remain perfectly still while the other children bounced around her like pinballs. He retreated to his office and picked up the phone. He called a contact he had at Child Protective Services, a woman named Elena, who had helped him with difficult cases before. "Elena, I have a feeling about a student. No physical evidence yet, but the psychological markers are screaming at me. Family is high profile. The Evans family." There was a long silence on the other end. "Thomas Evans? The lawyer?" Elena's voice was hushed. "Marcus, be careful. That man has the city council in his pocket. If you go after them without a smoking gun, they'll ruin you before you can even file the paperwork." "I don't care about me," Marcus snapped. "The girl told me she's already dead at home. We can't wait for a bruise to show up on her face, Elena. By then, it might be too late." "I'll see what I can find on their medical records," Elena promised. "But Marcus, if there's no physical abuse, psychological torture is nearly impossible to prove in a court where the father owns the judge." Marcus hung up, his heart sinking. He looked out his window and saw the playground where Lily had sat the night before. He realized then that the quiet game wasn't just happening in the Evans house. It was happening in the whole town. Everyone was too blinded by the family's gold to see the rot underneath. He decided then and there, if the system couldn't protect Lily, he would have to find the truth himself. He just didn't realize that the truth was far more twisted than a simple case of a strict mother. The morning passed in a blur of administrative noise, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. He kept checking the security feed of the hallway outside Lily's classroom. Every few minutes he'd see her small form through the glass door, sitting perfectly still. She didn't fidget. She didn't whisper to her neighbors. She was a statue in a room full of kinetic energy. At 10:30 a.m., the school nurse, Mrs. Higgins, burst into Marcus's office without knocking. Her face was pale, and she was holding a small, crumpled piece of paper. "Marcus, you need to see this. Lily came to my office complaining of a stomach ache. I offered her a cracker, but she refused to open her mouth. She just handed me this and ran back to class." Marcus took the paper. It was a scrap of a brown paper lunch bag. On it, in shaky, barely legible crayon, were 3 words: "Help the basement." "Did you check her?" Marcus asked, his voice low and dangerous. "I tried to get her to lift her shirt so I could check for bloating or bruising, but she started hyperventilating. She kept saying, 'The cameras are watching. Mommy sees through the walls.' Marcus, she's terrified, not just of her parents, but of the very idea of being seen." Marcus stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "I'm going to the house." "Marcus, you can't. You don't have a warrant and you're not CPS," Mrs. Higgins warned. "If Thomas Evans finds out you're trespassing, he'll have your license by sundown." "I'm not going as the principal," Marcus said, grabbing his coat. "I'm going as a concerned neighbor. They live in the Heights, right? The big Victorian on the corner." "Yes, the one with the high stone wall. But please be careful." Marcus drove through the winding, tree-lined streets of the wealthy district. The Evans house was a masterpiece of architecture. Gray stone, wraparound porch, and perfectly manicured hedges. It looked like a postcard for the American dream. But as Marcus pulled up to the curb, he felt a wave of nausea. He stepped out of his car and walked up the stone path. The silence here was different from the school playground. It was heavy, artificial. No birds were singing. No wind seemed to move the leaves. He rang the doorbell. A chime echoed deep within the house. A minute passed, then 2. Just as Marcus was about to ring again, the heavy oak door creaked open. Sarah Evans stood there, wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of green juice. Her eyes, usually bright and welcoming, were cold and sharp. "Mr. Reed, to what do I owe this unexpected visit? Is Lily all right?" "Lily is at school, Sarah. I'm here because she left something behind yesterday." Marcus lied, his heart hammering. "A notebook. I thought it might be important for her homework." Sarah's smile didn't move an inch. "A notebook? How thoughtful. But Lily doesn't bring work home. We believe in keeping home and school strictly separate. It keeps the mind organized." "I see. Well, since I'm here, I was wondering if I could have a quick word with Thomas about the fundraiser." "Thomas is at the firm. He won't be back until late." Sarah started to close the door. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a very busy schedule. Sarah, Marcus said, blocking the door with his foot. Lily mentioned a basement. She said she spent a lot of time there. I was thinking of finishing the school's storage basement and wanted to see how you laid yours out. You have such great taste. The change in Sarah's face was instantaneous. The mask of the golden mother shattered. Her pupils dilated and her grip on the door handle tightened until her knuckles turned white. "We don't have a basement, Mr. Reed," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "This house is built on a concrete slab. Lily has a very vivid imagination. Perhaps too vivid. Maybe she needs a different kind of school, one that deals with troubled children." She slammed the door. Marcus stood on the porch, his heart racing. A concrete slab? He looked down at the foundation of the house. There were small rectangular windows near the ground, half hidden by thick ivy. Basement windows. She had lied, plainly, easily, and with a threat tucked into her words. As Marcus walked back to his car, he looked up at the second-floor window. A curtain flickered. For a split second, he saw a face. It wasn't Lily's. It was an older woman, her hair gray and disheveled, her eyes wide with terror. She pressed a finger to her lips in a shushing motion before disappearing into the shadows. Marcus got into his car and sat there, shaking. Who was the woman? The Evans didn't have a live-in nanny. They didn't have a grandmother nearby. He looked back at the house. The perfect facade was cracking, and what was peeking through the gaps was something far darker than simple child discipline. It was a haunting. Marcus returned to the school just as the final bell rang. He watched from the window as Lily was ushered into the black SUV again. This time, Sarah didn't wave. She didn't even look at the school. She stared straight ahead, her face a mask of cold fury. Marcus waited until the parking lot was empty before heading to the school's archives in the basement. If the Evans family was hiding something, or someone, it might be buried in the paperwork from when they first moved to the district 6 years ago. He spent hours going through old enrollment files. He found Lily's birth certificate, born in a private clinic in Switzerland. Her immunization records were signed by a doctor who had since retired and moved out of the country. Everything was private, exclusive, and untraceable. Then, he found a folder tucked behind a drawer that had been mislabeled. It was a background check the school board had run on Thomas Evans when he applied to be the head of the Legal Advisory Committee 3 years ago. Most of it was standard, but there was a small note from a private investigator attached to the back. Subject's first wife, Elizabeth Vance, reported missing 8 years ago. Case closed due to lack of evidence. No foul play suspected. Subject remarried Sarah Thorne 6 months after the disappearance. Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. A first wife. He looked at the date of the disappearance. It was only a year before Lily was born in Switzerland. He pulled out his phone and searched for Elizabeth Vance. A few local news articles popped up from a neighboring state. Elizabeth was a brilliant pianist, a woman of grace and beauty. The photos showed a woman with high cheekbones and a hauntingly familiar smile. She looked exactly like an older version of Lily. But there was something else. In one of the articles, there was a photo of Elizabeth's mother, a woman named Martha Vance. Marcus squinted at the grainy image on his phone. The woman in the photo, though younger and healthier, was the same woman he had seen in the upstairs window of the Evans house. The dead grandmother wasn't dead, and the missing wife's mother was being kept in a house that supposedly didn't have a basement. Marcus realized with a jolt of horror that Lily wasn't Sarah's daughter. She was Elizabeth's, and Sarah wasn't just a stepmother, she was a jailer. Suddenly, the lights in the archive room flickered and died. In the pitch blackness of the school basement, Marcus heard the heavy thud of the door locking from the outside. Then the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps walking away. "Hello," Marcus shouted, rushing to the door. He rattled the handle, locked. A voice drifted through the small vent above the door. It was a man's voice, deep, resonant, and chillingly calm. "Mr. Reed, you've always been an overachiever, but some secrets are like deep-sea pressure. If you try to bring them to the surface too quickly, everyone involved just explodes." It was Thomas Evans. "Thomas, open this door," Marcus yelled. "I think you need a night to think about your career, Marcus. And about Lily. She's a sensitive girl. It would be a shame if she had to move away because her principal became unstable." The footsteps faded. Marcus was left in the dark, surrounded by the paper trail of a family built on a foundation of lies. He realized then that the quiet game had just expanded, and if he didn't get out, he would be the next one silenced. The darkness in the school basement was absolute. Marcus sat on the cold floor, his back against the heavy metal door. He could feel the vibration of the building, the hum of the industrial refrigerator 3 floors up, the distant groan of the pipes. But here, in the archives, there was only the smell of old paper and the sound of his own ragged breathing. Thomas Evans hadn't just locked him in, he had sent a message. The Golden Father knew Marcus was digging. Marcus pulled out his phone. No signal. The thick concrete walls and the depth of the basement had turned the room into a dead zone. He cursed under his breath, the screen's glow illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. He looked at the file again. The grainy photo of Elizabeth Vance, the missing first wife. If Elizabeth disappeared 8 years ago and Lily is 6, Marcus did the math. The timeline didn't fit a standard pregnancy, unless Elizabeth hadn't disappeared, unless she had been kept. Suddenly, a faint scratching sound came from the other side of the wall. It wasn't a mouse. It was rhythmic. Tap, 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 tap. "Who's there?" Marcus whispered, pressing his ear to the cinder block. "Mr. Reed?" A tiny muffled voice drifted through the ventilation duct. Lily, is that you?" "I climbed through the milk chute in the kitchen," the voice whispered. It sounded hollow, echoing through the metal vents. "I saw Daddy leave. He said he had to fix a leak at the school. I followed him in the shadows. I'm in the crawl space above you." Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. "Lily, you shouldn't be here. It's dangerous. You need to go back before they miss you." "They won't miss me," she said, her voice trembling. "Mommy is in the red room. When she goes there, she drinks the red water and sleeps for a long time. She won't wake up until the sun comes. Mr. Reed, I found the key." A small silver object clattered through the vent, landing on the floor near Marcus's feet. It was the master skeleton key for the school's old wing. "Lily, how did you get this?" "I took it from the janitor's closet while he was cleaning the gym last week," she confessed. "I was going to use it to hide here forever, but you're trapped. You have to get out. You have to find the other Lily." Marcus froze. "The other Lily? Who is that, sweetheart?" "The one in the picture under the floor," she whispered. "The one who doesn't breathe anymore. Mommy says if I'm bad, I'll go stay with her in the concrete." The line between a child's imagination and a horrific reality blurred in Marcus's mind. He scrambled for the key, fumbled with the lock, and felt the heavy bolt slide back. The door swung open. The hallway was empty, bathed in the eerie green glow of the exit signs. He looked up and saw a small vent cover pushed aside. A pair of pale legs disappeared into the darkness of the ceiling crawl space. "Lily, wait!" But she was gone, moving through the school's skeleton like a ghost. Marcus realized he couldn't call the police yet. If he did, Thomas would use his influence to claim Marcus was harassing them, using a troubled child as a pawn. He needed the other Lily. He needed the floorboards. He ran to his car, his mind spinning. He didn't go home. He drove back to the Heights, parking 3 blocks away from the Evans Victorian mansion. The house was dark, except for one window on the top floor, a dull, throbbing red light. Sarah's red room. Marcus crept through the backyard, his heart hammering against his ribs. He remembered the woman in the window, Martha Vance. If she was still alive, she was the witness he needed. He found a cellar door hidden behind a thicket of overgrown rose bushes. It was locked with a heavy padlock, but the wood around the hinges was rotting. He grabbed a heavy stone from the garden path and, with a silent prayer, smashed the wood. The door gave way with a sickening groan. Marcus stepped down into the darkness. He clicked on his small penlight. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing not a concrete slab, but a fully furnished, windowless apartment hidden beneath the house. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Plush rugs, velvet curtains, and a grand piano in the corner. But there were no doors out, only the stairs leading up to the main house. And there, sitting at the piano in total silence, was the gray-haired woman. She didn't turn around. Her fingers moved over the keys, but no sound came out. The strings had been cut. "Martha," Marcus whispered. The woman froze. She turned slowly, her eyes wide and glassy. "Is it time for the recital?" she asked, her voice a raspy ghost of a sound. Thomas says if I play well, I can see my daughter today. I haven't seen Elizabeth in... Oh, I don't remember. Marcus felt a tear prick his eye. Martha, I'm Marcus. I'm a friend of Lily's. I'm here to take you home. Martha laughed, a dry, brittle sound. Home? This is home. Thomas saved me. He said the world thought I was dead, so I might as well stay where it's safe. He says Elizabeth is in the garden. She's watching the roses grow from the bottom. Marcus's blood ran cold. The garden. Suddenly, the floorboards above them creaked. The heavy sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoed through the ceiling. Sarah's awake, Martha whispered, her face contorting in terror. She knows you're here. She smells the outside on you. A voice boomed from the top of the stairs, cold and mocking. Mr. Reed, I told you. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. Marcus looked up. Thomas Evans was standing at the top of the cellar stairs, a heavy fireplace poker in his hand, but he wasn't looking at Marcus. He was looking at something behind him. Marcus turned. There, standing in the corner of the cellar, was a small wooden hatch he hadn't noticed before, and from beneath the hatch, a tiny pale hand reached out holding a yellow ribbon, the same ribbon Lily had been wearing in her hair that morning. Stay away from that hatch, Marcus, Thomas said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. He began to descend the stairs, the metal poker scraping against the stone wall. Scritch, scritch, scritch. Marcus stood his ground, though his legs felt like water. What's under there, Thomas? Is that where Elizabeth is? Is that the other Lily? Thomas stopped 3 steps from the bottom. The light from the red room above spilled down the stairwell, casting a shadow long and distorted across the cellar floor. Elizabeth was difficult. She didn't understand the rules. She thought she could leave with the baby. She thought she could take my legacy and throw it into a divorce court. So you killed her? Marcus asked, his voice shaking with fury. I protected my family, Thomas corrected him. Sarah understood. Sarah knew that a mother isn't the person who gives birth. It's the person who maintains the order. We told the world Elizabeth ran away. Her mother, Martha, well, she was already losing her mind. It was easy to adopt her into our basement. A bit of gaslighting, a few special vitamins, and she became the perfect ghost. Martha, still sitting at the silent piano, began to hum a haunting, tuneless melody. She seemed to have retreated into a safe place in her mind, away from the monster on the stairs. And Lily, Marcus pressed, slowly edging toward the hatch. She knows, doesn't she? She's not your daughter by Sarah. She's Elizabeth's child, the child you stole. Thomas's face contorted. She is our daughter, but she's starting to look too much like her mother. She's starting to ask questions with those eyes. That's why the quiet game had to become more permanent. At that moment, the hatch flew open. It wasn't Lily who climbed out. It was a dog, a small skeletal terrier that had been missing from the neighborhood for months. The poor creature was shivering, its eyes milky with cataracts. But behind the dog, tucked into a small velvet-lined crawl space, was a box, a small, ornate jewelry box. Don't touch that, Thomas roared, lunging forward. Marcus was faster. He grabbed the box and scrambled back, tripping over a rug. The box fell, the lid popping open. It didn't contain jewels. It contained dozens of microcassette tapes, each labeled with a date. Elizabeth was a recording artist, a small voice whispered from the shadows of the cellar stairs. Marcus looked up. Lily was there, standing behind her father. She looked tiny, her yellow backpack still on her shoulders. In her hand, she held a small, portable tape recorder. She recorded everything, Lily said, her voice stronger than Marcus had ever heard it. She hid them in the floor because she knew Daddy would take her voice away. I found them. I've been listening to them in the dark. Thomas turned, his eyes wide with shock. Lily, give me that recorder, now. No, Lily said. She pressed play. The cellar was filled with the sound of a woman's voice, beautiful, melodic, and filled with tears. October 14th. Thomas has locked the doors again. He says the world is too dangerous for the baby. He says Sarah is coming to help manage me. I'm scared, Lily. If you're hearing this, know that I tried to run. I tried to take you to the park, but the gates were locked. He's building a cage and he's calling it a home. Thomas let out a primal scream of rage and swung the poker at the tape recorder. Lily ducked, the metal whistling over her head and smashing into the piano. "Run, Lily!" Marcus shouted. He tackled Thomas around the waist, the two men crashing into the velvet curtains. Marcus was older, but Thomas was fueled by a desperate, panicked strength. They wrestled on the floor, the silent piano ringing out as they slammed against it. "Go to the school, Lily! Go to the police!" Marcus yelled, pinning Thomas's arm back. Lily didn't run. She walked over to Martha Vance. She took the older woman's hand. "Grandma," Lily said softly, "the quiet game is over. It's time to scream." Martha looked at Lily, and for the first time the fog in her eyes cleared. She looked at the man struggling on the floor, the man who had stolen her daughter and her life. Martha Vance didn't scream. She stood up, walked to the fireplace, and picked up a heavy, decorative brass urn. With a strength born of 8 years of imprisonment, she swung. The heavy brass urn connected with the side of Thomas's head with a dull, sickening thud. The lawyer's eyes rolled back, and he slumped onto the plush rug, the fireplace poker clattering to the floor. Marcus scrambled away, gasping for air, his shirt torn and his heart hammering against his ribs. For a moment, the cellar was eerily quiet. The only sound was the clicking of the tape recorder Lily still held in her hand, the voice of her dead mother continuing to whisper secrets from beyond the grave. "Is he?" Martha whispered, her voice trembling as she looked down at the man who had been her jailer for nearly a decade. "He's alive," Marcus said, checking Thomas's pulse, "but he's out." He turned to Lily. The little girl was remarkably calm, though her face was as white as bone. She was staring at her grandmother, the woman she had only seen through window panes and in the reflections of her mother's old photos. "Grandma Martha?" Lily asked. The older woman reached out with a shaking hand, her fingers grazing Lily's cheek. "You have her eyes. Oh, my sweet girl. You have Elizabeth's eyes." The moment of reunion was shattered by a sharp, rhythmic sound from above. Click, click, click. The sound of high heels on the hardwood floor of the main house. "Sarah," Marcus hissed. He grabbed the fireplace poker, his knuckles white. "She's coming down." "The red room door," Lily whispered, her eyes wide with fear. "She must have heard the piano. She hates the piano." Marcus looked around the room. There was no other exit besides the stairs and the rotted cellar door he had broken through. "We have to go. Now. Out through the garden." He grabbed Martha's arm, helping her up from the piano bench. The woman was frail, her muscles wasted from years of confinement. They moved toward the back exit, the cool night air rushing in through the broken wood. "Lily, come on," Marcus urged. But Lily stood frozen at the base of the stairs. She was looking up into the darkness of the house. From the top of the stairwell, a silhouette appeared. Sarah Evans stood there, framed by the crimson glow of the hallway light. She wasn't wearing her golden mother mask anymore. Her hair was loose and wild, and she held a heavy glass bottle in her hand. "Lily," Sarah said, her voice a terrifying melodic lilt, "you've been a very, very bad girl. You let a stranger into our sanctuary. You woke up the ghosts." "You're not my mother," Lily said, her voice small but steady. Sarah laughed, a sharp, jagged sound that echoed off the stone walls. "I am everything you have. Without me, you're just the daughter of a woman who didn't want you enough to stay alive. I gave you a life. I gave you a name. And this is how you thank me? By playing with trash in the dirt?" Sarah began to descend the stairs, one slow step at a time. Marcus stepped in front of Lily, the poker raised. "Stay back, Sarah," Marcus warned. "The police are already on their way. I sent a signal before I came in." He was bluffing, praying his phone had caught a bar of service near the exit, but the conviction in his voice made Sarah pause. "The police," Sarah sneered. "In this town? Thomas owns the police, Mr. Reed. He plays golf with the chief. He's the one who funds their pension balls. Do you really think they'll believe a disillusioned principal and a crazy old woman over us?" "They'll believe the tapes," Marcus countered, pointing to the jewelry box. "They'll believe the woman you've been holding hostage for 8 years. This is over, Sarah. The quiet game is finished." Sarah's eyes flickered to the tapes on the floor. For the first time, a flash of genuine panic crossed her face. She looked at Thomas's unconscious body, then back at Marcus. "You think you're a hero," she spat, "but you've just signed that girl's death warrant. If we go down, everyone goes down." Suddenly, Sarah didn't charge at them. Instead, she turned and ran back up the stairs, locking the heavy oak door from the other side. "What is she doing?" Martha asked, clutching her tattered shawl. Marcus heard a faint hissing sound. Then the smell hit him. It was sharp, chemical, and terrifyingly familiar. "Gas," Marcus choked out. "She's opening the lines. She's going to burn the evidence, and us with it." The smell of natural gas began to fill the cellar, thick and suffocating. Sarah was hysterical, and Marcus knew that in her mind, a fire was the only way to clean the mess they had made. "Out! Everybody out now!" Marcus shouted. He pushed Martha toward the broken cellar door, the cool night air a godsend against the encroaching fumes. He grabbed Lily's hand, but the girl resisted. "The pictures!" Lily cried out, pointing toward a small closet under the stairs. "Mommy's pictures! If they burn, she'll be gone forever! Lily, there's no time! I won't leave her again!" Lily's eyes were filled with a fierce, desperate light. She broke away from Marcus and dove into the small closet. Marcus groaned, his lungs burning. He couldn't leave her. He followed her into the cramped space, which was filled with old boxes and moth-eaten clothes. Lily was frantically pulling at a loose floorboard in the back of the closet, the real other Lily hiding spot. Underneath the board was a thick leather scrapbook and a small gold locket. She grabbed them, hugging them to her chest. "I got them! I got them!" They scrambled back toward the exit just as a muffled whoosh echoed from the floors above. The gas had found a pilot light or a spark. The ceiling groaned and orange light began to flicker through the cracks in the floorboards. Marcus shoved Lily through the broken door into the arms of Martha, who was waiting in the rose bushes. He scrambled out behind them, the heat at his back like a physical blow. They ran. They didn't stop until they reached the stone wall at the edge of the property. Marcus turned back just in time to see the Victorian mansion erupt. The windows of the red room shattered outward, glass raining down like diamonds. The beautiful, perfect house was being consumed by a hungry, roaring orange beast. "Thomas," Martha whispered, her hand over her mouth. "He's still inside." Marcus looked at the burning structure. He felt a pang of guilt, the instinct of a teacher to save everyone. But as he started toward the house, he saw a figure emerge from the front door. It was Sarah. She was stumbling, her clothes singed, clutching a heavy briefcase, likely filled with the money and documents she thought could buy her a new life. She didn't look back. She ran toward the black SUV parked in the driveway, but she didn't see the shadow waiting for her. From the darkness of the trees, a man stepped out. He wasn't a police officer. It was old Arthur, the school janitor. He was holding a heavy iron flashlight, and his face was set in a mask of grim justice. "You forgot your keys, Mrs. Evans," Arthur said, his voice gravelly. Before Sarah could react, Arthur swung the flashlight. It wasn't a killing blow, but it was enough to knock her to the ground. He stepped on her wrist, forcing her to drop the briefcase. "I've been watching you for years," Arthur muttered, his eyes fixed on the burning house. "I saw how the little one looked at the gate. I saw how you treated the Golden family like a prison. I might just be a janitor, but I know trash when I see it." Sirens began to wail in the distance, real ones this time. The neighbors had finally noticed the inferno in the heights. Marcus sank to the grass, pulling Lily and Martha into a protective embrace. Lily was shaking, her face buried in Marcus's coat, but she was still clutching the leather scrapbook. "It's okay," Marcus whispered, though his voice was cracked. "The quiet game is over, Lily. You can speak now. You can say anything you want." Lily looked up at the burning house, then at her grandmother, and finally at Marcus. She opened her mouth, and for the first time in her life, she didn't whisper. "I want to go to the park," she said, her voice clear and ringing over the sound of the flames. "I want to go to the park and see the sun." The perfect facade of the Evans family had crumbled into ash, leaving behind 3 broken people, and one small girl who was finally, for the first time, breathing the air of the living. The fire department arrived in a whirlwind of flashing red lights and shouting voices, but the Victorian mansion was already a skeleton of glowing embers. The Golden house had burned with a ferocity that suggested the very wood was tired of holding so many secrets. Paramedics swarmed over the lawn. They moved Martha Vance onto a stretcher, her frail body looking like a bird's nest of bones under the heavy wool blankets. Sarah Evans was being zip-tied by a grim-faced officer, her screams of, "Do you know who my husband is?" falling on deaf ears as the neighborhood watched her fall from grace. Marcus sat on the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket draped over his shoulders. Lily sat beside him, her small hand tucked firmly under his arm. She hadn't let go of the leather scrapbook for a single second. "Principal Reed?" Marcus looked up. It was Detective Miller, a man with tired eyes and a coffee-stained tie. He looked from the burning wreckage to the little girl, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. "The janitor, Arthur, told us what happened, or at least his version of it. He says you went in there to get the girl." Miller pulled out a notepad. "We found Thomas. He's alive, barely. The smoke got to him after the blow to the head. He's on his way to the ICU under guard." "He kept her mother there, Detective," Marcus said, his voice raw. "He kept Martha Vance in a hole for 8 years. And Elizabeth, I think she's still on the property, somewhere near the roses." Miller sighed, looking at the scorched garden. "We'll have a forensic team here at sunrise. If there's anything left to find, we'll find it." He paused, looking at Lily. "Is she all right?" "She's stronger than any of us," Marcus replied. "I'm not Lily," the girl said suddenly, her voice startling both men. She opened the leather scrapbook to the first page. There was a photo of a woman, Elizabeth, holding a newborn baby. On the back, in elegant cursive, was written, "My daughter Elena, may you always find the light." "My name is Elena," she said, her thumb tracing the ink. Sarah changed it because she said Elena was a ghost name. She wanted a Lily because lilies are for funerals. Marcus felt a cold shudder. Sarah hadn't just stolen a child. She had tried to rewrite the girl's very soul. "Detective," an officer shouted from the ruins of the cellar, "you need to see this. We found a safe that survived the heat. It's full of evidence. Ledgers, recordings, and a stack of passports." As Miller walked away to investigate, Marcus turned to Elena. "Elena, that's a beautiful name. It means shining light." "I knew," she whispered, looking at the moon through the smoke. "I kept the name in my pocket. I whispered it to my pillow every night so I wouldn't forget who I was. Mommy told me to in my dreams." The chaos of the night began to settle into the organized hum of a crime scene. But as the sun began to peek over the horizon, casting a pale gray light over the wreckage, Marcus realized the nightmare wasn't quite over. The golden couple had been the center of a web that spanned the entire city. Thomas Evans didn't just have secrets, he had leverage. And as Marcus watched the investigators pull charred folders from the rubble, he saw the names of judges, council members, and even the chief of police. The truth was out, but the truth was a dangerous thing to hold. "Mr. Reed?" Elena looked at him, her eyes wide and perceptive. "Are we safe now? Or is this just another quiet game?" Marcus looked at the powerful men in suits who were starting to arrive at the perimeter of the yellow tape. Men who looked more worried about the files in the safe than the lives that had been destroyed. "We aren't safe yet, Elena," Marcus said, standing up and tightening his grip on her hand. "But this time, we aren't playing by their rules. This time, we're going to make sure everyone hears the music." He knew what he had to do. He couldn't trust the local precinct. He couldn't trust the system that had allowed a woman to vanish for 8 years without a single serious ripple. He needed to go higher. He needed to go to the one person Thomas Evans couldn't buy. Marcus drove his old sedan toward the city, Elena asleep in the passenger seat, still clutching her mother's scrapbook. In the back sat Martha Vance, staring blankly out the window at the passing trees. She was free, but her mind was a shattered mirror, reflecting bits and pieces of a life she could no longer fully grasp. "We're going to see a friend, Martha," Marcus said softly. "Someone who can help us." He was heading to the state capitol to find Julian Thorne. Julian was Sarah's estranged brother, a disgraced former prosecutor who had been run out of town years ago after trying to investigate Thomas Evans's charity foundations. If anyone knew the depth of the rot, it was Julian. They reached a small, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city. When Marcus knocked, the man who answered looked nothing like the polished lawyer from the old news clippings. Julian was thin, with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that twitched with caffeine and paranoia. "Reed?" Julian squinted. "What the hell are you doing here? And who are—" He stopped mid-sentence as his eyes fell on Martha. "Mrs. Vance? My God, they said you died in a nursing home in France." They lied about everything, Julian, Marcus said, pushing his way inside. The house is gone. Sarah and Thomas are in custody, but it won't hold. Not with the friends they have. Julian shut the door and bolted it 3 times. He looked at Elena, who was waking up. Is that Elizabeth's girl? Her name is Elena, Marcus said. And she has the tapes, Julian. All of them. Julian sat down at a table littered with half-empty coffee cups and legal pads. You don't understand, Marcus. Thomas didn't just defend criminals. He ran the infrastructure. He has a dead man's switch. If he goes down, he has enough dirt to sink the governor. That's why they'll let him walk. They'll blame everything on Sarah. They'll say she's mentally ill, that she acted alone, and Thomas was a victim of her delusions. Not if we have Martha, Marcus argued. She can testify to what Thomas did. She saw him every day. Martha can't even remember what year it is half the time, Julian countered, his voice rising in frustration. The defense will tear her apart in 5 minutes. We need something more. We need a direct link. I have the locket, Elena said, her voice small but clear in the cramped room. She reached into the scrapbook and pulled out the small gold locket she had rescued from the fire. She handed it to Julian. Julian flicked it open with his thumbnail. He expected to see a photo. Instead, he saw a tiny, folded piece of microfilm tucked behind the hinge. Elizabeth was always smarter than Thomas, Julian whispered, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. She wasn't just recording his voice. She was a paralegal at his firm before they married. She knew where the bodies were buried, literally. He held the film up to the light. This isn't just family drama, Marcus. This is the ledger for the Oakwood Development Fund, the school's money. The scholarship fund you've been overseeing? It's been a money laundering front for the cartel for a decade. Marcus felt the room spin. The school, his school, was the heart of the corruption. Every new scoreboard, every renovated lab had been paid for with blood money. And he had been the face of it, the honest principal who gave the scheme a respectable mask. They used me, Marcus whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. They used everyone, Julian said. But Elizabeth, she made sure that if she went down, the whole house of cards would follow. This film contains the offshore account numbers. It's the one thing Thomas couldn't burn because he never knew she found it. Suddenly, the window in the living room shattered. A red laser dot danced across Julian's chest. Get down, Marcus screamed. The sound of the glass shattering was like a gunshot in the confined space of the apartment. Marcus tackled Julian to the floor just as a high-caliber round whistled through the air, punching a hole clean through the wooden kitchen table. Into the hallway, move, Julian roared, grabbing his laptop and the microfilm. Marcus scooped up Elena, shielding her body with his own, while pulling Martha toward the narrow corridor that led to the bathroom. They huddled together on the floor, the smell of cordite and pulverized wood filling the air. They found us, Julian hissed, his back against the wall. I told you, Marcus, Thomas has eyes everywhere. That wasn't a police raid. That was a cleanup crew. How did they track me? Marcus asked, his mind racing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He looked at the device, then at the small blinking blue light on the side. He hadn't turned it off. The GPS was a breadcrumb trail straight to their location. He cursed and smashed the phone against the floorboards. They won't just keep shooting from outside, Julian warned. They'll come up the stairs. They can't risk us escaping with that film. Elena was trembling, her small hands clutching Marcus's sleeve. The quiet game is getting louder, she whispered, her voice devoid of tears. She had moved past fear into a strange, hollowed-out state of survival. Not this time, Elena, Marcus promised, though he felt the weight of the poker he had tucked into his belt, a meager defense against professional killers. Julian crawled toward a small ventilation grate in the hallway floor. There's a service ladder behind the water heater. It leads to the basement of the neighboring building. It's tight, but we can make it. They moved with agonizing slowness. Marcus helped Martha down first. The old woman was in a daze, humming that same tuneless melody, then Julian, then Elena. Just as Marcus was about to lower himself into the dark shaft, he heard the front door of the apartment kick open. Heavy boots crunched on the broken glass. Check the rooms, a voice commanded. Cold, professional, and familiar. Marcus froze. He knew that voice. It was Officer Miller's partner, the man who had been at the crime scene only hours ago. The law had arrived to finish what the fire hadn't. Marcus dropped into the shaft and pulled the grate shut just as the bathroom door was kicked off its hinges. They descended into the bowels of the building, the air thick with the smell of damp concrete and rust. They emerged in an alleyway 3 blocks away. Julian led them to a beat-up, nondescript van. "We can't stay in the city. We need to go to the only place they won't expect." "Where?" Marcus asked, his lungs burning. "Back to the beginning," Julian said, starting the engine. "We're going to the school." "The school?" "Julian, that's the first place they'll look." "No," Julian said, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. "The school basement has a secure server room. It's on a separate grid. Thomas insisted on it for security. If we can get that microfilm scanned and uploaded to the federal database from the school's terminal, it will trigger an automatic internal affairs lockdown. It's the only way to bypass the local judges." As they sped through the dark streets, Marcus looked at Elena. She was staring at the leather scrapbook. "Mr. Reed?" she asked. "Is my mommy really under the roses?" Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He thought of the beautiful woman in the photo, the woman who had fought so hard to leave a trail for a daughter she would never see grow up. "She's in the light now, Elena," Marcus said softly, "and she's about to have the last word." Oakwood Elementary looked like a dark, sleeping beast under the moonlight. The yellow crime scene tape from the earlier incident flapped in the wind, a reminder of the leak Thomas had tried to fix. They entered through the maintenance hatch Arthur the janitor had left unlocked. The hallways that Marcus had walked for 20 years now felt like the intestines of a monster. Every shadow looked like an assassin. Every groan of the building sounded like a footstep. "This way," Marcus whispered, leading them toward the administrative wing. They reached the server room, a cold, sterile chamber filled with the hum of processors and the blinking of 1,000 green lights. Julian sat at the main terminal, his fingers flying across the keys. "I need your biometric override, Marcus," Julian said. "You're the only one with the clearance to access the federal portal." Marcus stepped forward. He placed his hand on the scanner. Access granted. The microfilm was fed into a high-resolution scanner. Images began to flicker across the screen. Bank statements, names of politicians, and, most chillingly, the blueprints for the school itself. "Wait, zoom in on that," Marcus said, pointing to the basement layout. Julian enlarged the image. There was a room marked utility storage that didn't exist on the official school maps. It was located directly beneath the auditorium. "That's where the money went," Julian whispered. "Not into the classrooms, into a physical vault beneath the children's feet." Suddenly, the monitors flickered. The green lights turned red. A message scrolled across the screen in bold, white letters. "System lockdown, unauthorized access detected, command override T. Evans." "He's doing it from the hospital," Julian gasped. "He has a remote link." A speaker in the ceiling crackled to life. Thomas Evans's voice, raspy and distorted by a ventilator, filled the room. "Marcus, I underestimated your tenacity, but you're in my house now. Did you really think I wouldn't have a quiet game for the school, too?" "It's over, Thomas," Marcus shouted at the ceiling. "We've already scanned the ledger. The feds will have it in minutes." "Minutes is a long time," Thomas hissed, "especially when the fire suppression system has been rerouted. Tell me, Marcus, do you know what happens when the halon gas is released in a sealed room? It displaces the oxygen. You won't burn this time. You'll just fall asleep. Quietly." The heavy steel door of the server room slammed shut with a hydraulic hiss. The magnetic locks engaged. Hiss? A faint white mist began to spray from the vents in the ceiling. "Julian, get that file sent!" Marcus yelled, slamming his shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. Martha began to cough, her thin chest heaving. Elena huddled in the corner, holding the scrapbook over her face. "I can't! The encryption is too thick!" Julian shouted, his eyes watering as the oxygen levels began to drop. "He's blocking the upload!" Elena stood up. She walked to the terminal, her eyes fixed on the screen. She saw the quiet game interface, the one her father had used to monitor the house. "The password," she whispered. "What?" Julian gasped, clutching his throat. "The password," Elena said, her voice clear despite the thinning air. "He made me say it every night before I was allowed to sleep. He said it was the only thing that mattered." She reached for the keyboard. Her small fingers hovered over the keys. "What is it, sweetheart?" Marcus asked, sinking to his knees as dizziness took hold. Elena typed 6 letters, Lillyps. "Lily's presence," she whispered. He thought he owned her, even her ghost. The screen flashed green. Upload commencing, 10%, 40%, 80%. The mist continued to pour in. Marcus felt his vision blurring. He looked at Elena, who was standing tall, the shining light her mother had named her. She wasn't playing the game anymore, she was winning it. Upload complete, authorities notified. The vents stopped hissing. The magnetic locks clicked open. Marcus slumped against the wall, drawing in a jagged, wonderful breath of hallway air. They had done it. The secrets were no longer buried. But as the door swung wide, they weren't met by the police. Standing in the hallway, silhouetted by the moonlight, was Sarah Evans. She had escaped custody. She was covered in soot, her eyes vacant and wild, holding a kitchen knife that gleamed like a silver tooth. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice a jagged ruin. "It's time to go home." The hallway was a tunnel of shadows, and at the end of it stood Sarah Evans. She looked like a nightmare birthed from the very walls of the school. Her expensive coat was shredded, her face smeared with ash, and the kitchen knife in her hand trembled with a frantic, lethal energy. "The police, they let me go," she lied, her voice cracking into a high-pitched giggle. "They know I'm the victim. They know you stole my baby." Marcus stood up, his legs shaking from the effects of the hell on gas. He stepped in front of Elena and Martha, his arms spread wide. "It's over, Sarah. The files are sent. Every judge, every crooked cop, they're all going down tonight. There's nowhere left for you to hide." I don't need to hide," Sarah hissed, lunging forward. "I just need to finish the story." She swung the knife, a wild, uncoordinated arc. Marcus ducked, the blade slicing through the air inches from his face. He grabbed her wrist, and the two of them crashed into a row of metal lockers. The sound echoed through the empty school like a series of gunshots. Clang, clang, clang. "Run!" Marcus yelled over his shoulder. "Julian, take them to the auditorium. Lock yourselves in." Julian grabbed Elena and Martha, dragging them down the hall toward the heavy oak doors of the theater. Sarah was surprisingly strong, fueled by a delusional, adrenaline-soaked rage. She bit Marcus's arm, forcing him to release his grip. She scrambled back, her breath coming in ragged, wet gasps. "You think you're so righteous," she spat, blood staining her teeth. "But you're the one who destroyed her. She had a perfect life. She had a mother who kept her safe. Now she's just nothing, a fragment of a dead woman." "She was never yours," Marcus shouted, his voice echoing with the authority of a man who had finally found his purpose. "She was a prisoner in a house of mirrors. You didn't love her, Sarah. You just loved the reflection of yourself you saw in her." Sarah shrieked and charged again. This time, Marcus didn't retreat. He waited until she was close and then used her own momentum against her, tripping her and sending her sliding across the polished linoleum. He didn't wait to see if she got up. He turned and sprinted toward the auditorium. Inside, the theater was vast and dark. Julian had managed to bar the main doors with a heavy stage prop. Elena and Martha were huddled in the front row, right beneath the stage where the school held its annual pageants. "Is she coming?" Elena whispered, her eyes wide. "She's close," Marcus said, gasping for air. Suddenly, a heavy thud shook the doors, then another. Sarah was throwing herself against the wood, the knife scratching at the gaps in the frame. "Lily, open the door!" Sarah's voice was a haunting sing-song. "The quiet game is over, honey. It's time for the final sleep." Marcus looked at the stage. He remembered the blueprints, the vault. "Julian, the floorboards under the podium." They scrambled onto the stage. Marcus found a hidden latch, a piece of the floor that looked solid but shifted when he applied pressure. He pulled it back, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. "Down, everyone down." They descended into a room that was the polar opposite of the cellar at the Victorian house. This was high-tech, reinforced with steel, and filled with stacks of black duffel bags. This was the heart of the Oakwood Development Fund, millions of dollars in cash, laundered through the innocence of a primary school. But in the center of the room, there was a small glass-walled office. And inside that office, on a series of monitors, was a live feed of the hospital. They saw Thomas Evans. He was sitting up in his hospital bed, his face pale but his eyes burning with a cold, calculating intelligence. He was holding a phone. "He's watching us," Julian whispered. The phone in the vault began to ring. Marcus picked it up. Thomas. Marcus, the lawyer's voice came through, steady and terrifying. You found the treasury. Congratulations. But did you notice the timer on the wall? Marcus looked up. Above the door, a digital clock was counting down. 3:42, 3:41. Sarah isn't coming in to kill you, Marcus, Thomas said. She's the distraction. The vault is rigged with a thermal incendiary. In 3 minutes, the money, the ledger, and the troublesome witnesses will be reduced to fine white ash. I'll be the grieving widower who lost his wife and daughter to a madman principal who tried to rob the school. You're a monster, Marcus whispered. I'm a businessman, Thomas corrected. And in business, you always cut your losses. The sound of the auditorium doors splintering echoed from above. Sarah had broken through. They could hear her boots hitting the stage. Lily, where are you, my little flower? Marcus looked at Elena. She wasn't looking at the money or the timer. She was looking at a small, dusty piano in the corner of the vault, a relic from the school's old music department that had been stored there and forgotten. She walked over to it. She sat on the bench. Elena, we have to find a way out, Marcus urged. There's no way out, Elena said softly, but there's a way in. She began to play. It wasn't the tuneless humming of her grandmother. It was a complex, beautiful melody, the one her mother, Elizabeth, had played on the tapes. The music drifted up through the floorboards, filling the auditorium. Above them, the footsteps stopped. The screaming stopped. Sarah Evans stood on the stage, the knife falling from her hand. She looked down at the floor, her face twisting in a mixture of horror and recognition. The music was the one thing she couldn't control. It was the sound of the woman she had tried to erase. Elizabeth, Sarah whispered. In that moment of hesitation, the doors of the auditorium burst open. This time, it wasn't the local police. It was a tactical unit from the State Bureau of Investigation, led by the federal agents Julian had notified. Drop the weapon, hands in the air! Sarah didn't look at the soldiers. She looked at the floorboards, her eyes glassing over. I'm sorry, she whispered to the ghost of the music. I just wanted to be beautiful. She reached for the knife, but a red laser dot appeared on her forehead. She stopped. She sat down on the stage and began to cry. Not the fake tears of a pageant queen, but the hollow, broken sob of a woman who had finally realized the mirror was shattered. The timer on the vault didn't reach 0. As the federal agents swarmed the school, their cybersecurity team managed to bypass Thomas's remote link, freezing the countdown at 0:12. The Golden Empire fell in a single night. Thomas Evans was arrested in his hospital bed, charged with kidnapping, money laundering, and first-degree murder once the forensic teams discovered the remains of Elizabeth Vance beneath the scorched rose bushes of the Victorian estate. Sarah Evans was moved to a high-security psychiatric facility, where she reportedly spends her days staring at her own reflection, refusing to speak a word. The quiet game had become her permanent reality. 6 months later, the sun was warm on the grass of the city's Central Park. It was a Saturday, and the air was filled with the sounds of children laughing and dogs barking. Marcus Reed sat on a bench, a newspaper in his lap. He was no longer the principal of Oakwood Elementary. The school had been closed for a massive investigation, and he had chosen to retire, taking a job as a consultant for a nonprofit that specialized in child advocacy. He looked toward the swings. Martha Vance sat in the shade of a large oak tree. She looked healthier, her hair neatly combed, her eyes focused. She was watching a little girl in a bright yellow dress. The girl wasn't sitting still. She wasn't a statue. She was running, her hair flying behind her like a golden silk ribbon. Elena, look at me! Elena climbed to the top of the highest slide. She didn't look down at the dirt. She looked at the horizon, at the city skyline, and at the endless blue sky. She turned and waved to Marcus. It wasn't a desperate palm against glass. It was a wide, joyous wave, a signal that she was here, she was alive, and she was seen. Marcus waved back, a lump forming in his throat. He thought about the night on the playground when she had told him she was already dead. He thought about the tapes, the fire, and the vault. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold locket, the one Elena had given him for safekeeping. Inside, he had placed 2 photos. One was of Elizabeth, the mother who had fought from the grave. The other was of Elena, taken just last week on her first day at her new school. Elena slid down the slide, her laughter ringing out clear and true. She ran over to Marcus and hopped onto the bench beside him. "Mr. Reed?" she asked. "Yes, Elena? Do you think my mommy can hear me when I laugh?" Marcus looked at the shining light sitting beside him. He looked at the park full of life and noise and chaos. "I think," Marcus said, "that she's the one who taught you how to laugh again, and I think she's been waiting a long time to hear that sound." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. For the first time, she didn't have to be quiet. She didn't have to hide. The truth hadn't just shocked the world. It had set a little girl free. The playground was no longer a graveyard. It was a beginning.